The rain came in sheets, the kind that turned city lights into watercolor streaks and made the world feel like it had been rinsed clean. He had been driving for an hour after a late meeting, the roads slick and almost empty. The chauffeur had urged him to stay inside to wait the storm out, but he had wanted the quiet, the steady pulse of the road to think. A city like his never stopped, but tonight it felt small, reduced to the soft thump of wipers and the droning tires. A flash of something on the curb caught his eye. For a second he thought it was trash, a pile of ruined umbrellas, but then the car slowed without him even realizing. Two small shapes huddled close, hunched under a soaked cardboard box, faces turned inward against the rain. He killed the engine and the sudden silence was as loud as thunder. He stepped out without a coat. The rain hit him instantly, cool and sharp. The twins were so small against the curb, their clothes clinging to their thin bodies, hair plastered to their heads. One was asleep or pretending to be, the other peered up when he crouched, eyes wide and suspicious, the way children look at something dangerous and fascinating all at once. He had seen a lot in his life. He had built companies, negotiated deals that shifted markets, and known the loneliness that success sometimes brought. But the sight of two babies, because their faces were still so young, even in the hard light of street lamps, abandoned in the rain, triggered something older, something that did not care about balance sheets or influence. He reached for the cardboard and found it sodden and weak. When he peeled it back, a smell rose up, a mix of wet wool and milk, a scent that rent something in him. They were twins, a boy and a girl, strapped together with a frayed blanket. A scrap of handmade knit lay nearby, bobbing in the puddle. There were no notes, no bag, nothing that explained why someone would leave them here on a night like this. "Hey," he said, voice low. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." They didn't answer. The smaller one clung to the other like a lifeline. The rain made tracks across their cheeks. He gathered them both into his arms and felt the bone-thin weight of them. They were warm, fever-warm and breathing, shallow but steady. "Get them inside," he told the chauffeur, and the world snapped back for a second into the familiar order of servants and service. He wrapped the twins in his own coat, ignoring the way it soaked through, and carried them to the car. The chauffeur hovered with towels and a bag of spare clothes, eyes avoiding his for the moment his hands were full. At the hospital, nurses took them with quick, efficient hands. He sat in the sterile waiting room and watched the rain smear portraits on the window. He considered calling someone, anyone, the board, a lawyer, but the thought of delegating this felt wrong. He had money enough to make any problem vanish with a phone call, but these were not problems that could be solved with transfers and signatures. A pediatrician emerged after an hour with a chart and soft eyes. The twins were dehydrated and cold, but they were fine for now. No genetic markers of immediate risk. They were too young for school, still in diapers. The boy had a small bruise on his shoulder, the kind you get from being jostled, not from an accident. The girl had a faint birthmark on her collarbone, shaped like a crescent moon. "Any sign of who they belonged to?" he asked. "No identification," the doctor said. "No signs of prolonged neglect, which is odd. Someone made sure they didn't starve, but they were left like this. It could be an arrangement or the mother couldn't cope. We report this to Child Services." He nodded. He listened to the official words, foster care, protective custody, the forms that would set these children's future on an institutional track. And something in him hardened. He had never planned to be a savior. He had never planned to be a father. Yet the idea of two lives being shuffled through a system, their names forgotten, their potential diluted into paperwork, felt intolerable. He signed the temporary consent forms to let the hospital treat them. Then, on impulse that surprised even him, he asked what he needed to do to keep them overnight. The nurse blinked. He paid whatever fee they named and smiled with the practiced calm of someone used to getting what he wanted. The hospital allowed guests to stay in a private room if they could cover it. He sat by their bassinets and watched their chests rise and fall. The city continued its anonymous humming outside the window, but inside, time bent around these two small bodies. He learned their breathing, the quick hitch of the boy's inhale, the soft sigh of the girl when she slept. He whispered nonsense at them, numbers he had memorized from reports, lines from speeches he had never given. It felt foolish and honest at the same time. When morning came, gray and washed clean, the social worker arrived. Her expression was professional but kind, the kind that made him respect the work she did and resent the limitations it implied. "They'll be processed into the system," she said, explaining their options. "Foster placements, kin if anyone steps forward, adoption. We have to run checks, try to find the parents. And if no one comes?" he asked. "Then we'll look for a stable foster home. We do our best." He asked about taking them temporarily, just until their mother could be found. There were rules, background checks, home investigations. The social worker explained them with the slow patience of someone who has seen desperate men try to buy time and lost. But then he took a breath and made a decision that surprised him more than anyone else. "I'll sponsor them," he said. "I'll provide whatever is needed. Put them in a good foster home, but keep me informed. If the system needs a guarantor, I'll be their guarantor." It wasn't the same as keeping them at home. It didn't let him hold them through the night, but it bought them protection. He left the office with their names registered as a concerned party and a vow that sounded dramatic even in his head: "I won't let them become statistics." Days turned into weeks. He funded private searches, posted flyers anonymously, hired a private investigator who preferred trench coats and late-night calls. He watched footage that captured only glimpses: a woman slipping past a hospital door, a frazzled young mother carrying groceries with 2 babies, a sedan that idled outside a shelter. Nothing definitive. He read reports from the social workers with the same intensity he had once used to study market trends, hunting for patterns, for a clue. On a Tuesday, the investigator called with breathless excitement. "We have a lead," the voice said. "A woman at a shelter in the outskirts. She was seen with twins around the same age, and there's mention of a midwife who remembers a name." He went. The shelter was not the polished charity event he was used to funding. It smelled of canned soup and detergent, of people who had run out of options. The woman who had been seen with the twins was called Maria. She was small, weathered, and guarded. She denied having children. When shown the photos of the twins, her hands trembled. "I didn't do it," she said. "I couldn't. I don't know where they are." But the midwife remembered a girl who came in late, eyes wild, accompanied by another woman. It was a tangle, not a story. It was also possible that the mother had been coerced, frightened into leaving the babies, or that she had been told an adoption would be safer. The investigator kept digging, and with each new piece, a portrait emerged that was less comforting. A neighborhood with a too-quiet rooming house, a landlord with a temper, a string of unpaid bills, a man who had left town the week before the rain. While the adult world argued and sifted, life for the twins moved forward in small human increments. They were placed with a foster family who had a daughter the same age, a woman who smelled of lavender and cinnamon and who treated the twins the way adults treat things they want to protect without understanding fully why. The boy, he had started answering to the name Eli when the foster mother sang to him, laughed when a dog barked. The girl, whom the house called June, liked to watch rain through a window and would press her forehead to the glass as if trying to catch the weather. He visited when he could, awkward in donated sweaters, not used to being a guest in a home that was not his. The foster mother offered coffee and watched him with a mild smile that implied trust. The kids seemed to sense something in him they could not name. Eli would curl his fingers around the hem of his sleeve when he was uncertain. June would search a face for warmth. It was a Tuesday when the call came that shifted everything. "We ran a check on a hospital registry," the investigator said. "A young woman with a name similar to Maria was registered the week before the twins were found. She left shortly after." He tracked down the records, confronted the landlord, and then finally found her in a tracing shoebox of a motel room. She looked smaller than he expected, a young mother with haunted eyes and hands that shook when she spoke. The truth came out in fits and confessions, not in the clean arc of a novel. She had been desperate. A partner who drank and demanded, bills that rose like tide, a threat that had been made when she could not pay. She had been told by someone she trusted that the twins would be safer, that they would find a better life. Panic had made her hands quick and her judgment worse. She had left them for a few hours, planning to return. She had never intended to leave them forever. She did not sleep for days after, waiting at shelters, asking everyone, but she had been turned away, judged, and threatened. In the end, shame caved her in, and she pretended to lose them because she thought that was easier than facing the man who had told her what to do. When she met him, when she met the billionaire who had found her children, she collapsed into a kind of quiet. Her voice was thin when she spoke. "I gave them away," she said. "I thought they'd be better. I didn't know how to come back." The legal threads were messy. The system had to decide whether the abandonment was willful or the result of coercion. She faced the possibility of losing them through legal channels that seemed both brutal and necessary. He listened to her story and to the investigators, and he made another choice. "I won't make it about blame," he told the social worker. "I will provide for them. I will make sure their mother gets help. If she is able, she will be part of their lives. If not, I will make sure they have what they need." He arranged for counseling, for legal aid, for a small apartment where the mother could start again without the fear that had governed her life. He offered a job through one of his company's community outreach programs, a position with dignity and a schedule that allowed childcare. It was not charity in the performative sense. It was scaffolding, bare and practical. Months later, when the rain returned one evening in a gentler pace, he found himself holding a birthday cake for two little people who had been left on a curb. Eli and June were no longer strangers. Eli was loud, unafraid, with a grin that stole the show. June was thoughtful, forever counting the raindrops that slid down the window with her small finger. "You'll tell people how you met?" June asked, frosting half dipping on her chin. "I found you," he said, grinning back. "You found me too." They laughed, the three of them, the sound folding into the hum of the apartment. The mother stood in the doorway, hair pulled back, eyes soft with a cautious pride. It had not been an easy road. There were conflicts that money could not cure, apologies that took time, trust that had to be rebuilt piece by piece. But he had stepped out of his car on a rainy night and changed the trajectory of 3 lives. He thought about the curb sometimes. He thought about how small decisions ripple outward. He had once measured success in acquisitions and profit margins. Now he measured it in full nights of sleep, in small fingers curling around his own, in a girl who pressed her forehead to the window and did not flinch when the rain came. He knew he could not fix everything. He knew the system still had its flaws. But he also knew that the choice to act mattered in a way that spreadsheets could not capture. On another rainy night years later, he watched Eli and June race down a street under a shared umbrella, their laughter bright as bells. He stood on his balcony, the city spread out below like a nocturne, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged to something larger than himself. Not family in the traditional sense, not tied by blood alone, but by messy, inconvenient love. He closed the balcony door and left the umbrella to dry. The rain would come again, unpredictable and unbidden. He would be ready.